Hello YouTube, I'm Natanis Likens, and welcome back to our driving home series, or driving to work series, or whatever the hell we're going to call this. Still working out the details on that. And yes, I'm pulling out of my parking spot right now. That's why I keep looking around. Obviously, I can't look at the camera while I'm driving. Or at least not 100% of the time. So, what's up today? What are we going to talk about? I have a subject in mind, but I did also look at the previous videos, and they have 0 views. 0 views. Okay. This isn't working. I really don't know what to do about that. I mean, I can't make people watch the videos. Just further reminds me that I'm dead in the water as far as making content. Right now, this is the best I can do. So, whatever. Let's not try to be down. I do have a subject in mind that I wanted to talk about today, and it's a subject that is, well, I'm not nearly as crazy with as the previous subject that we're not going to talk about that I keep bringing up. I mean, I even made a little meme out of it. Yeah, so that particular subject is, and this is not going to be very, why am I acting embarrassed about it? We're going to be talking about Pokemon. You got a problem with that? Go ahead and click off the video. I'm not getting views anyway. Yeah, we're going to talk about Pokemon. So, first off, we need to talk about my history with Pokemon. So, I was around playing video games when the first Pokemon launched. All the way back on the original black and white Game Boy with Pokemon Red and Blue. I never had yellow, but I think I had red. I think my brother had blue. So that's Colonel McDougal. He had blue, I think. I don't really remember who had which one. And we initially started off trying to do this whole, like, brother battle thing, where we were going to battle each other. So we wanted to pick Pokemon starters that were opposites of each other. Like, if he picked Squirtle, I would pick either Charmander or Bulbasaur. We weren't going to pick the same ones. Now, at the time, and I've said this in a few different places, I don't think I've made a big emphasis on it, but my first Pokemon was actually Bulbasaur. That was my very first one. I think Colonel McDougal's first Pokemon was either Charmander or Squirtle. I don't remember which. He's gotten out of that. He hasn't touched a game in years. So, yeah. Yeah, he hasn't touched any of those in a long time. I don't even remember the last one he actually played. As far as our video game interests, we went in 2 very different paths. Probably about the time he got into high school is when our personalities started splitting and becoming very different. And what I mean by that is what we enjoyed started becoming very different around high school, or around the time that he entered high school. So, yeah, he hadn't touched those very much, but so with that being said, my first Pokemon was Bulbasaur. Later on, my favorite starter for the time ended up becoming Charmander. And from there, you know, I had some of my favorites. Back then, you know, if you're familiar with the view of your battling Pokemon, all you got was kind of this awkward angle of the back of the Pokemon's head. So based on that, with Pokemon, I tended to use ones that I could actually, I didn't mind looking at, because there were some that just looked absolutely horrible from the back of their heads, or the side of their heads in a few cases. So typically I use Pokemon based on how good it looked from you as the player's perspective, because of the weird angle, because you're looking at it like this. That's not going to work because the camera's looking the wrong way. But yeah, like stick your hand out in front of you and then like look at it, and that's the angle that you were looking at the Pokemon. Like the front here would be the Pokemon's face, and that's the angle you were looking at. So I tended to use a lot of them that the design for that back view looked really good. And the ones that I remember the most for that are Charizard, Nidoking, and Jolteon. Those were the main three that I had on every team back then. And I did restart that game several times and play a whole new playthrough, getting my Charmander, getting my Nidoking, and getting my Jolteon. As far as others, it was always kind of difficult for me to find ones that I actually liked. Back then, ghosts were pretty pathetic, so I didn't fall into the whole love of Gengar like some people do nowadays. And I say that because Gengar is everywhere. That's one of the bigger Pokemon out there as far as fandoms. But I didn't get into that, and plus you need to be able to trade evolution it. As I stated, unfortunately my brother kind of stopped playing, so getting that trade evolution was not very possible. Plus the back view of it was just horrid. But a few of them that I did try to use, as far as water, I always spent that $500 at the beginning of the game to get the Magikarp, because I knew if I did the bait and switch and kept getting it XP, eventually I would hit that level 20 or level 25, because I swear, I'm pretty sure it was level 20, but I think later it got changed to 25, or I've got that backwards, I don't remember which. Obviously not looking at anything, I don't know off the top of my head. But getting Gyarados was absolutely amazing. Gyarados is probably the one water type that I usually use. Vaporeon wasn't that bad, but at the time there was no way to get another Eevee. We didn't have genders at the time, you couldn't make eggs, so getting another Eevee was pretty much impossible unless you traded over an Eevee, which once I got a hold of both games, yes, I did do that and had both Flareon and Vaporeon. Now, Vaporeon was, or Flareon was kind of underwhelming, plus I already had Charizard, so I didn't really use it. As far as grass types, I've never been a fan of grass types. Bugs, despite what some people will say about bugs, Butterfree was extremely useful for a couple of different reasons. One, it had sleep powder, so it made catching Pokemon a little bit easier, just put them to sleep. And believe it or not, with its, I think it's concussion that it gets, which was a psychic ability, that came in very handy. And psychic abilities were pretty broken back then, and psychic Pokemon were pretty broken. Though I don't remember them being nearly as bad as some people complain about and have talked about in their own videos. I know M&J TV talks about it quite a bit, how broken psychics were back then, but I don't really remember it being that bad. I do remember that gym leader being a hassle, but I don't think it was the hardest one. The hardest one to me was actually the ghost user. The ghost gem was the one that was the most difficult to me. And that's because you really needed specific moves to hurt the ghost. Otherwise, you couldn't really touch him. I think that's Agatha or something. I don't really remember. But yeah, that was probably the most difficult one for me, was Agatha. I never really had a good way of dealing with the ghost Pokemon. And yeah, you could get like psychics, but again, with that whole back view thing, I wasn't really a fan of Hypno. I wasn't really a fan of Kadabra, and I didn't really have a Alakazam. Plus, I didn't want it anyway. So yeah, you got to deal with that. And I think that's pretty much all the psychics in that game, except for Mewtwo. But you don't get Mewtwo until way later. And I don't think I even used Mewtwo because I didn't like that that like back piece to its neck. It's got this like kind of tendril that goes from the back of its head back to its back. And it looked weird. It looked really weird. As far as some others, Jinx, I never liked Jinx, never cared for it. Yeah. Moving on from there, we got to Silver and Gold. And I don't want to go over every single one of these. I really want to like skip forward some. But you get to Silver and Gold, we get the Dark type, which Umbreon, absolutely love Umbreon. And that is probably the start of my EV obsession. Is when Gold and Silver came out and they introduced 2 more EV evolutions in Umbreon and Espeon. And I absolutely love Espeon. Espeon is always my psychic on my team. And because of the coverage there with just one psychic, I always have Espeon on my team. Umbreon covering psychic and ghost is... For a time, it was the Pokemon that was always on my team. If I could have it on my team, I would have it. I will admit, later on, a Pokemon came along that ended up kind of replacing that, and is actually the first time in the entire history of the game that I went for a water type over the fire type starter, and that was in X and Y. So let's just go over it real quick. I've done this in other videos and other places. Let's just real quickly go over it. Gold and Silver, I went with Cyndaquil. Ruby and Sapphire, I went with Torchic. God. Diamond and Pearl. Which one's Diamond and Pearl? I think that's Chimchar. And then Black and White, I went with T-Pig. I think that's it. And we get to X and Y, and that's the first time that I used something other than fire. I went for water. I had to have Froakie. I had to have Greninja. So we got water and dark right there. That's such a huge coverage. I mean, you're covering fire, ground, rock, Psychic, and Ghost, all with one Pokemon. Absolutely love Greninja. Along with that, Chimchar is another really good one, because that's a lot of coverage you got there. With Chimchar, you're covering grass types, you're covering steel types, double. You're also covering rock types. I think fighting. I don't remember if fighting super effective against ground. But yeah, that's another at least 4, maybe 5 types covered by one Pokemon. So love those two. I actually have this headcanon of my character going around with both Greninja and Chimchar. Sorry, Infernape and Jolteon, Espeon, and now Sylveon, because Sylveon having coverage for Dark type, which is kind of an overlap with Infernape, and Dragons. Which, can we talk about Dragons real quick? Because I've heard a lot of people say that Dragons are just overpowered, and adding in the Fairy type was much needed in order to nerf Dragons. You know, there's not that many Dragons out there, and even then, most of the gym battles through the history of Pokemon that have Dragon types aren't that difficult. Like, in the history of Pokemon, there's only a couple of them that I would say are difficult. And this is one part because of the strategy I've always had with dealing with Dragons, and another part because I have a history of constantly using fire types. Usually, if there is an early game rock type, that messes me up. Brock, not so much, because, like I said, Butterfree is absolutely amazing early game. So Butterfree really helps dealing with Brock. So just grind out the Butterfree and you're good to go against Brock. Not to mention there's a few other Pokemon in that area. I don't know how M and J is like, you have fewer options, so the ability to take on these gym leaders is more important. Let me correct something about that with what he says about Pokemon in that capacity. Typically, man, we got home fast. I don't think I was driving that fast. Typically, there are Pokemon early that are counters to whatever gym you're about to face. With Brock, in the original game, there is both the absolute grind of getting a Butterfree that early, and you can go off and find both male and female Nidoran. Now, the reason that that's important is because they get the male one gets the fighting move Double Kick, which is very effective against Brock in the original game. Now, in later games, it's also very effective against normal type. And you do have the potential for poison as well, but that really doesn't matter against the rock types. But it is what it is. So, yeah. Also, like, go get yourself a Nidoran. I absolutely love Nidoking. Nidoking had a place on my team as my poison beef stick for like forever, because he had, way back in the day, he had amazing health, he had amazing defense, and I don't care what anybody says. Nidoking was actually the first Pokemon that I took and soloed the Elite Four and the Champion with. And that's partly thanks to its diverse move pool and TM pool. Two of the things that you could give a Nidoking is Earthquake and Ice Beam. So that Ice Beam covers just about everything, and then the Earthquake covers all the ground and rock types pretty well. With that said, the Ice Beam actually does work really well against the dragon types, and that's part of the reason why I'm like, I don't know why people are so fussed about dragon types. They've never been that special in Pokemon to me. And in fact, 90% of them aren't dragons. I don't know what they are, but they are not dragons. A good chunk of them are just dinosaurs. I don't know what Japan is thinking calling these creatures dinosaurs. Or calling these dinosaurs dragons. Let me correct that. Said that completely wrong. But yeah, they've got all these creatures that are all these Pokemon that just look like dinosaurs, and they call them dragons, or they're serpents and they call them dragons. They're not dragons. That's a snake. I wish I could name some of them, but I can't name them off the top of my head. There's very few of the dragons that I would actually call a dragon. Shalmance, absolutely. The three-headed thing, I can't think of its name, absolutely is a dragon. Some of the others, like the stupid apple worm thing, no, that's a bug inside of an apple. That's not a dragon. But yeah, so dragon to me has never been a huge deal. Having fairy type being able to take care of dragons much quicker, amazing, love it. But I was never really fussed about dragons. I think the one type that always gave me trouble in any game is actually considering the type of team that I usually run in games, there's not really any one specific type that really troubles me or bothers me, except for one instance. And I know I said earlier that, you know, rock is one of those, but that's kind of not true, because typically I will have something that has fighting coverage to take out rock types. That's pretty normal for me. But the one instance of a type causing me trouble was in Sword and Shield. The final gym, the Gym 7. It's not the final gym, because the final gym is the dragon user. Don't know his name off the top of my head, but the Dark Gym. Yeah, the Dark Gym messed me up. Okay, I gotta explain this. Why did the Dark Gym mess me up? X and Y, wow. Sword and Shield was the first one that I decided, instead of running a normal beef stick team that I usually do, where I have move coverage over everything, I wanted to get a couple of Pokemon on my team and build a theme team. So the theme of this team, and this is all based on the fairy user, because she's looking for somebody that has, you know, that was wearing pink, that was had some kind of story going on. I was like, you know what, I could put together a team that would actually tell a little bit of a story. And what I had was a Gardevoir and a Gallade, who were effectively like the prince and princess, and I can't think of the Pokemon's name. The big imp. I can think of the little one, Impidimp. Yeah, his final evolution. I had his final evolution on my team, which is Fairy Dark. And then I had a Bisharp on my team, which is Dark Steel. And the Imp was the villain, and the Bisharp was one of his little minions. And then I had the two heroes. I had a Scizor, which was the hero of the story, and his trusty steed, a Galarian Rapidash, which is Psychic type. So, do you see the problem here? Half of my team was weak to dark types. Not only that, but one of that gym leader's dark types was also a dark fighting type. So then now the other half of my team, being the Scizor, Bisharp, and the Imp, are now weak to that one. Yeah, that gym leader was a pain in my butt. And it's hilarious to me because everybody out there was saying he's the easiest one. I will admit, if you got the right team, he's the easiest one, but he is literally the only one that gave me any kind of trouble. And that's because the team that I was running to run something interesting was half the team was being destroyed by him, by one of his Pokemon, and then the other half of the team was being destroyed by another one of his Pokemon. That gym battle took me a while to actually beat. I think I ended up having to scrap my team in order to beat him. I had to get a whole new Pokemon team going in order to get past him. I just literally could not do anything to him. I mean, and part of that problem is that, with Gardevoir, even though it is Fairy Psychic, it's still Psychic. So I was getting hit much harder. And Gardevoir's actually pretty weak as far as health and defense compared to some of the dark type Pokemon that he has. Whatever the one that looks like it's a member of KISS is, that one was really the biggest troublemaker. I just could not down that one. And then the Scrafty, whatever its name is, that one was another big problem. Because that one is, like I said earlier, it's fighting dark. So it knows some fighting moves that were just absolutely destroying my two steel types and my one dark type. So, yeah, that gym battle it took me forever to beat that one. I think I was stuck at that gym for months until I finally was just like, to hell with it. I am going to build a different team in order to beat this one gym leader. Because I can't out damage them, and considering that he's got the type advantage, which, I've seen M&J and PM7 and a few others do battles like that and come out on top magically. I don't know how they managed to come out on top. But in this particular instance, there was just no way that I was beating them. Yeah, it was very rough. I'm back a lot sooner than I should be. As you can tell, I just parked. Yeah, we've still, in the last few videos, we've had about 6 more minutes before I reach home. And I didn't even really talk all that much about what I wanted to talk about as far as Pokemon's concerned. So we're going to sit and chat for a minute. I am going to go ahead and shut the car off. Hopefully, you know what? I'm worried that's going to end the video. So now, Anyway, so moving on with that, we got Scarlet and Violet. Okay, if you haven't seen anything else of mine, in fact, you know, these little car videos nobody's even watching anyway, so more than likely you've probably seen my other videos dealing with Pokemon stuff than you will this one. But I have this trend going on ever since Gen 2. So let's go over this real quick, and then we'll get into what I really wanted to talk about with Scarlet and Violet. Gen 1 I absolutely loved. I like all the Pokemon, or at least most of them. Gen 2, same deal. I like pretty much the majority of all the Pokemon. Gen 3, I don't care what anybody tells you, those starters suck. They are some of the most powerful starters if you're a competitive player. I will admit that. But as far as like actual design of how these Pokemon look, they're terrible. These are some of the worst ones out there. They are not the worst, but they are some of the worst out there. And that's Torchic, Mudkip, and Trico. I don't like any one of them. Their designs are terrible. They are ugly as sin. So moving on from there, we got Gen 4. I do like Gen 4, about 50-50 on them. There's some of Gen 4 Pokemon that I just can't stand. Others are absolutely amazing. Gen 5, this is another one that I don't like. I know I said earlier that T-Pig was my Pokemon of choice for this gen, but even then, like, Emboar is just, it's just a worse version of Infernape. Flat out. I mean, I was never really impressed with Emboar. And the others, like Whoop-de-Doo, I didn't really care for them. And then we go on to Gen 6, and I absolutely love these guys, even though I've never actually used them all. Fennekin is probably, if you take just the baby, the first stage starters, Fennekin is probably my favorite of all of them. I absolutely love Fennekin. Fennekin is amazing. Though I didn't use it. I never once used it as my actual starter Pokemon. It was always Froakie. Chespin, I like Chespin, and I like its final form. I'm just not a grass type user. Even in most teams that I've had, grass is just not something I want on my team. And you may be going like, why? Why not grass? Grass is great. Well, here's the problem. And this is all because, you know, coverage moves. Like, what gives you the best bang for your buck as far as covering other types? So, grass is very effective against water, rock, and I believe poison. And that's it. That's the three that it's good against. Well, poison I don't really care about because I always have a psychic, and poison's weak to psychic. So that's covered. Rock. Well, I typically run with either some form of water or some form of fighting type. And sometimes I got double coverage there. So, yeah, I'm not worried about that either. Water. Okay, I always run an electric type. Usually it's Jolteon. Except for that one team I was telling you about a little bit. You know, whatever. And the reason for that is not to replace the grass, but with electric, you get to cover both grass and flying types. Okay? And that's very, very handy because there's always two things you have to deal with in every single game. You gotta deal with some form of water. Except for in Scarlet and Violet, there's no real dealing with the water section. That's so weird. And there's always some section that has a plethora of flying type trainers. Again, Scarlet and Violet kind of did away with that. But in every game, there's been those two things. You got to deal with the water section. You got to deal with a section that has nothing but birds. So electric type has been my go-to for both of those. Which makes having any form of grass Pokemon absolutely redundant. You don't need it. And in fact, of all the starters, grass is probably the one type you're not going to choose for a playthrough 90% of the time. So yeah, I don't really use grass starters typically. So let's keep going. Gen 8. No, Gen 7. We're on Gen 7. Yeah. Okay, this is the worst of the worst. And much like Finnegan, though, I do really like Litten. Litten is amazing. Litten's final evolution is a monstrosity that should never have been created. In fact, all three of those are monstrosities that never should have been created. And there might be some people that want to argue with me on that with Decidueye, and I'll give you that. Decidueye is a decent enough designed Pokemon. The other two are just garbage. I still went with Litten anyway, because I don't like grass to begin with. And I have never had a need for grass to be on my team at all. And the water type in Gen 7 is... What were they thinking with that mermaid? What were they thinking? That has got to be the worst looking Pokemon of all time. And then they went and made a penguin with an ice cube on its head. Okay, moving on from there. Gen 8. Oh my god. I love all three of these guys. I absolutely love them. Scorbunny was, of course, my starter for Gen 8. Absolutely love Scorbunny. Amazing. Cinderace. Chef's kiss. Cinderace is amazing. Relabloom, again, I don't use grass types, but Relabloom is phenomenally, like, probably one of the best looking grass starters we've ever gotten. I absolutely love how he looks. Inteleon, okay, I don't use water that much, but Inteleon is amazing too. Like, I would definitely, if I had to choose a water type, it would either be Inteleon or it'd be Greninja. Most likely it would be Greninja, but Inteleon's pretty dang good. I will give you guys that. If you're a water trainer, props to you guys. That's an amazing Pokemon. Then we get to Scarlet and Violet. Okay, what were they thinking with this game? Of all the Pokemon they introduced in this game, there are only two that I actually like. So the first one, and you got to remember, I'm not as knowledgeable about all the Pokemon names as some others are, like big YouTubers are. So one of those that I absolutely love is the Ghost Fire armor Pokemon. I can't think of what its name is, but it's the one that is black and blue or black and purple, however you want to look at it. I absolutely love that thing. He is amazing. I love that Pokemon. It's probably the first time I've ever actually used a ghost type on my team, but I've been using him as my fire type. You'll find out why that's my fire type in Scarlet and Violet in a minute. The other one is It's one of the Paradox Pokemon, Iron something. I know they're all named Iron, but it's the Paradox Pokemon equivalent of Gallade. That Pokemon looks really cool. Like, I really like that one. Hasn't really been on my team much. I did have it for a little while, but it just felt... in Scarlet and Violet, like, currently, I have 2 Steel types on my team already. I have a Galarian Meowth, because payday. I had to have that. Once I got the Galarian Meowth through surprise trade, I was like, yep, there we go. That's what I'm using. So I've had this Galarian Meowth on my team for like forever now. And then the other one is I've had a Lucario on my team for this gameplay. Not really sure why I have 2 Steel types, but I do, and it's been working. Scarlet and Violet have been they've been pretty much pushovers as far as the gym leaders are concerned. Now, I'm actually done with that portion of it. I'm working on the DLC stuff now. In fact, I'm on the Indigo Disc stuff. But the gym leaders were pretty much pushovers in Scarlet and Violet. I didn't really think any one of them was good or strong or problematic. Yeah, I didn't think any of them were. Now, the Titan battles, there's a couple of the Titan battles that actually got me. Like, they were a pain in my butt. The first and most noticeable one was Iron Treads. Iron Treads took me about 4 or 5 tries to actually beat him. And that's partly because of how the game works as far as its progression mechanics. So it's very open as far as what order you can do things in. And when I got to Iron Treads, I think he was number 3 as far as what I was doing. So he was around level 30, level 40 when I went to fight him, somewhere in there. And yeah, he wrecked me a few times. And I didn't have the little fire guy on my team yet because I hadn't gotten to where I could get the evolution item for it yet. I didn't know where it was yet, and turns out it was a lot sooner than I thought. I just hadn't been able to get over there yet because I needed the sandwiches to unlock your bike's abilities to get to places. Can we talk about that for a second? And people have been arguing with me online about this, but typically the box art Pokemon is a legendary. Scarlet and Violet, these are not legendaries, okay? These are not legendaries. What these are the the heck's its name? Cyclone? Cylinder? Whatever it is, the little bike Pokemon that you see running around everywhere. It's just one of those, but depending on which game you have, it's gone either forward in time or backward in time and evolved. That's all it is. It is not a legendary. There could be hundreds of these things running around. And in fact, in the main storyline, there's another one. There are 2 of these things running around the world. And the reason I say it like that is because M&J went back through a while ago and talked about, you know, whether or not you can... Actually, there's 3 of those things in this game, now that I think about it, because you ride one, you catch one, you battle one. There's 3 of them. But a while back, he was talking about thinning down the legendary list, and to do that, he was going to build some criteria as far as whether or not a legendary stays a legendary. And those criterias were, one, there has to be only one of them. They have to be unique in their game, their origin game, or origin region. So, like, in the original Red and Blue, in the original, let me clarify that, in the original, and we'll start off from there. So, Mewtwo, Zapdos, Articuno, and Moltres all had, you could only find one of them throughout the entire game, okay? In later versions, in fact, Let's Go Let's Go's, you can find multiple of the birds flying around everywhere, even after you've caught them. So you could probably catch them again. So that's kind of a disqualifier for him. The second thing that he established with them is, do they have lore? And by lore, he was saying anything in-game that talks about the story of these Pokemon and makes it sound mysterious, or you have to find more information elsewhere. And that's important because there are several of them that it talks about Pokemon, and the 3 legendary birds, for instance. It talks about them, but it talks about them in a way that it's not lore. And in fact, in the red and blue games, or red and green games, or whatever, there was a few instances of the legendary birds being referred to as, hey, I saw this blue bird flying in the distance. And he hilariously points out that that's not a legendary, that's not lore, that's amateur bird watching. And it's absolutely hilarious to me because he goes on and on about all that. But yeah, the box art Pokemon isn't even a legendary. So, yeah, that's just kind of weird. And I'm tired of people talking about and saying that these games are good. Scarlet and Violet. Let's be clear. We're talking about Scarlet and Violet. These games are not good. Though I will admit I've sunk a lot of time into them because of what they've done in the DLC. Let's get one thing clear. Being able to catch starter Pokemon in a different ball, in a ball that is not a regular red and white Pokeball, is unique. We have never been able to do that before. By God, I am going to catch all of these as a female in a luxury ball. This is something we've never been able to do. That's the only reason I've been sinking so many hours into these games. I honestly cannot stand these. These are probably the worst games of the entire series. And that's saying something because I really didn't like Sun and Moon. Sun and Moon just whoop-de-frickin-do. Now, the other major problem I have, also the starters. The starters suck. I don't like any of their designs. And it's so bad because Spriggerito had such an amazing design concept as a grass cat that was my Pokemon. That's the first time I've ever chosen a grass type as my starter. First time ever. Well, unless you count Bulbasaur back in the day, but you know, I was a kid, first off, and I didn't really grow into that whole, why am I using grass? Grass sucks. I get more coverage out of 2 other Pokemon. Grass covers, like, back then it covered like 2 types of Pokemon, and then there's 2 types of Pokemon you can get that cover those, and then cover 2 more. So the coverage there as far as typings, grass never made sense to me. So getting Spriggerito as my starter was unique. I absolutely love Spriggerito. Spriggerito is great. Meowsked can go to hell. I do not like the fact that they made it an anthro. I don't like the idea that the cat stood up. That's the same for Litten. That's the whole reason I don't like Litten. Or, well, I like Litten. I don't like its final evolution because it's standing up. It's not a quadruped. It's not on all four legs. Yeah, my brain fart. I can't think of the word there. And that's the same with Spriggerito. Like, if it had stayed on all fours, I probably would have liked these Pokemon, but I didn't. And it's hilarious because it stays with the trend of every other generation I can't stand. I couldn't stand 3, I couldn't stand 5, I didn't like 7, and now I don't like 9. And 9 is probably the worst of all because there's literally only 2 Pokemon that were introduced that I give even half a shit about. Excuse my French. Yeah. But then the thing that really, really annoys me with this game, or these games, is, and this is something that I noticed, and I called out, and several Reddit forums have banned me from posting on there because I wanted confirmation on if I'm seeing this and other people aren't. And these games are extremely woke driven. I know we don't want to talk about politics here, but let me just get this out. So, first off, the player character is very androgynous in its design. Both characters wear pretty much the exact same outfit, which is outlandish to me. I was going through and looking at school uniforms, and nowhere out there did I find a school uniform where the girl is wearing a suit just like the guys. Typically, they're wearing at least a skirt. Now, take that with a grain of salt, because you may be thinking one thing, and that's no. The female character needs to look like a female. Flat out. I hate the fact that they didn't do that. I hate the fact that the costumes in Scarlet and Violet are probably the worst set of costumes we've gotten in any of the games since they introduced the ability to customize your character. It's terrible. I can't stand it. Even Diamond and Pearl did a better job, or Brilliant Diamond, Brilliant Shining Pearl. Even those did a better job with the costumes, and theirs are very simple. Like, so simple it's boring simple. I do not like the outfits at all. And it doesn't end there. It doesn't end there. Now, a lot of people complain about the one ice gym leader who is actually a guy, but looking at it, you would think it's a girl. Well, I hate to tell you, there's more characters in Scarlet and Violet that are just the same. You could easily think they're either a guy or a girl. Penny, for instance, is supposed to be a girl. Look at that character very carefully, because that is not a girl. That is a guy in a skirt. That's exactly what that is. Penny is not a girl. There's definitely a guy. And then you got the DLC characters. The one that's supposed to be the sister, the older sister, that's not a girl. That is definitely a design for a guy. And why they're trying to pass it off as a girl, I don't know. But that character is not even close to looking like a female. It looks more like a guy than it does a girl. I mean, just pay attention to the way the character looks. That is a dude. And there's several of them. And then start looking at the NPCs everywhere. One of the things that I noticed is all the big, bulky characters walking around are not guys. Those are girls. Yeah, take a good look at them. They've made all these big, bulky characters female. All of them. And then all the guys that you can find as NPCs walking around that aren't important NPCs or have some kind of thing that you can sell to, they're tiny compared to these huge ass women. There's a lot of woke imagery and things going on in those games that is utter garbage. And like I said in my last video, people need to start calling, you need to start calling out these companies, these businesses, and politicians on this garbage. And quit just kind of like, you know, paddling around and being like, oh, this is bad, but, you know, whatever. No, because this is the most outrageous thing I've ever seen. This is a child's game, and they have put all this imagery and things in there that just are like, what? And nobody's noticing this? Nobody's seeing it? Nobody's calling them out on that? Really? I mean, it is bad in there. And it gets... You may think that, no. You're looking too much into that. Well, start looking at some of the Pokemon that are missing from the decks in Scarlet and Violet. And then look at what's actually in X and Y. Because there's technically two Pokemon, I've already talked about them earlier in this video, that is missing in the decks for Scarlet and Violet, which makes no sense because they are actually in Sword and Shield. So why would you exclude a Pokemon that was in the previous gen, but yet you have all the others? Now, there are a few exceptions because there are some that have yet to be on the Switch, but this particular set of Pokemon have been on the Switch already. They have the models. So why did they exclude them? That is the male and female version of Nidoran. The male and female version of Nidoran, they cut out of the decks in this. Okay, that isn't me being a fan of Nidoran or Nidoking. This is me being like, wait a minute. They got all this androgynous garbage for the player. You've got all these characters that the sexuality just doesn't seem right. You got these masculine-looking females. You got these feminine-looking guys. And then you exclude a Pokemon that has always had a gender difference. Always. Like they're two separate entries, gender difference, since they were first created. Yeah, there's only one reason you would do that, especially considering that you've already had, and you have the assets for this Pokemon. There's only one reason you would cut that, is because you are doing exactly what I'm accusing you of. Which is weird, because this is a Japanese company. Why would they do this? That doesn't make any sense. Why would you start doing this with Pokemon when what has been going on as far as this wokeness is mostly an American thing? I have noticed that there is some of this also going on in both Canada and Britain, United Kingdoms. There is some of this also going on over there, where there's some wokeness things that are being shook up. So how this got way over into Japan, into the Pokemon company, kind of baffles me. But yes, it is there. And start looking at your game and noticing this stuff, because they're trying to get that garbage with your kids now. That's gotten too far away from Pokemon. So let's kind of get back to Pokemon. So yeah, the Scarlet and Violet, I have been catching, or working on catching all of these starters, specifically finding a female and catching it inside of a luxury ball. As far as what I've unlocked so far, I've unlocked the polar biome and I've unlocked the savanna biome. I've gotten all of them from the Savannah biome, and I'm only missing 2 from the Polar. Cyndaquil is a pain in the butt to get because it literally only spawns in 1 cave, and there's, so far, I've only seen 2 of the possible 3 spawns be able to spawn in Cyndaquil. And it's a giant pain in the butt because trying to go back and forth between that and spawn them in, spawn them out, trying to look for Cyndaquils, giant pain in the butt. So far, it's been pretty much a miss. Now I know the YouTube channel Shiny Catherine actually went back to Legends Arceus to catch both. What was it? It was Cyndaquil, and there was another Pokemon. It's just much easier to find them in Legends Arceus. And I don't remember what the other starter is, but it was Cyndaquil and one other that is much easier to get in Legends Arceus. I may do that in the future, I may not, I don't know. The main problem there is I never really got that far into Legends Arceus. I did enjoy it, but there was something about Legends Arceus that eventually I was just like, and just stopped playing. And I didn't really get that far into it. I think I've only managed the 3rd zone. I think I've been to the 3rd one. I'm not exactly sure. But yeah, I didn't get that far into Legends Arceus. Legends Arceus just was too much of an odd bod to me. It was a great game. It was beautiful. Played well. The mechanics were nice. There was just something off-putting about it. Much like there's a lot that is off-putting about Scarlet and Violet. But again, the only reason I've been plugging so much time into Scarlet and Violet is because this is the first time that I know of where we can catch all of the previous starters. We can't catch that generation starters, which I think is a shame. They should have included that too. That way we could catch those 3 in different Pokeballs, which, whoop-de-doo, they're not my favorites, but I am purposely trying to go through, catch all of them. I am thinking about possibly doing a living dex for the first time ever. One thing you gotta know about me in Pokemon games is I'm not a completionist. I do not have a single game where I've gone through and caught every single Pokemon possible in those games. So I don't have a single shiny charm on any of them. And I'm I am really thinking about doing that in Scarlet and Violet, though I may go back to Sword and Shield and do that, because I actually think those are better games, and in fact, like, being able to customize the characters is a lot better. But yeah, that's all I really wanted to talk to you guys about. Oh gosh, we've gone over an hour. So yeah, I will see you guys next time. Have a great day. Goodbye.